Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event celebrating the amazing team effort that brought about the world's largest island eradication of invasive species. Today, we have the director of that project, Professor Tony Martin, who's going to reveal some of the untold stories of that epic effort, and Alistair Wilson, a Bird Island scientist who worked for British Antarctic Survey on South Georgia, who's going to bring us up to date with the changes on South Georgia as a result of the Habitat Restoration Project. During Tony and Alistair's talks, you can type in questions using the Q&A button on your screen. And then after the talks, we're going to have a short question and answer session where some of those questions will be posed to Alistair and Tony. Then you're going to find out about what we hope to do together with you to make South Georgia's wildlife and heritage even safer for the future. So now I think we're going to go over to Tony to kick us off. Thank you.
Stand by, everyone. Is that okay? Can you see the screen? And let me just make sure that I can move on. Oh, look at that. Amazing. Okay, everyone, it's a delight to talk to you all. Good evening to most of you, and good morning to those of you who I know are dialing in from the Antipodes. And it's a delight, especially to have you guys along. I gather from Murray and Alison that we've got nearly 400 people signed in tonight. And I have to say, this is the largest audience I've spoken to for a few years. The last time I had a big audience like this was at the David Attenborough building in Cambridge a few years back. There were 750 people in the main conference centre there. They were spilling out the doors. And I'm convinced to this day it had nothing to do with the fact that Sir David himself was the next but one after me speaking that day. And talking of David Attenborough, most of you will be aware that South Georgia is his favourite place in the world, and his love of the island and the wildlife there, and his enthusiasm for the project that we all collectively undertook was so important, especially in the early days when we were trying to get people's confidence to demonstrate that we really could do this. And so we're all very grateful to him, and me especially, because I think my career was probably inspired more by him than by anyone else. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been in a wave of nostalgia as I've been rereading the diaries that I made in the field during that remarkable time, and also looking at hundreds of photographs to be able to put together a presentation that's a little bit different from the other 50 or so that I've done over the years. And it just reinforced my mind that at that time I thought we were doing something pretty remarkable, and I had the pleasure and privilege of working with a remarkable team of people, and that's just being reinforced with the passage of time. It was a great group, and I miss seeing everyone every day as we did for that long period of time. So my talk this evening, The Untold Stories, it's in two parts. The first part, relatively brief, is just a reminder of what we did and what it was all about. And then in the second part, I'm going to be talking about some of the things that didn't make the headlines when we were actually out there. Of course, we were trying to tell a very positive story. Nothing ever went wrong. You know, it was all brilliant, and thank goodness it all worked very well in the end. But of course, there were some things that didn't go quite so well, and I'm going to be talking about some of those to portray some of the reality of trying to put together such a massive project involving people from several different continents in one of the most remote spots in the world. So just a reminder of what South Georgia looks like. I took this photograph from 10,000 feet at the very west end of the island on a dingle day in the first season. So the Bay of Isles is on the left-hand side, and in the very extreme far right, 100 miles away or so, that's the other end of South Georgia. So you're looking at just about the entire island there. And most of you will know that it's only the north coast that's got much ice-free land, and this is where all the wildlife and most of the rats and mice were living. Rats and mice were taken to the island by whalers and sealers, and this boat spent most of its life catching whales at South Georgia. But in fact, I took this photograph in Iceland in 1980 when I was working as a young biologist at the whaling station there. And I knew the history of the whaling ships in Iceland, this far-flung place called South Georgia, which I never thought I'd have the privilege of ever getting to. And of course, I got to know it quite well. And so this is how the problem started, humans bringing rodents onto South Georgia, actually from many parts of the world. And they particularly hit the birds that were ground nesting and the non-seabirds. Most of the larger seabirds, the albatrosses and the penguins, were fairly resilient just because of their size. But the smaller birds, the underground nesters, the prions, the storm petrels, and the ground nesters like the ducks and the pipits were badly hit. The Wilson stork petrel, one of the species which is particularly badly hit, they can almost not survive in the presence of rats. So what do you do if you're the South Georgia Heritage Trust? Will you call in the rat busters? And here's the king of the rat busters. This is the helmet of Peter Garden, who I think may be listening in. And South Georgia Heritage Trust decided to get serious and bring in the heavyweights, of which Peter was one. And the technique that we chose to free this massive island of rodents was to spread bait from helicopters. We ended up buying 3. This is the one that was owned by Jackie Onassis originally. And the bait was spread from a bucket hung underneath, a bit like fertilizer being sprayed from a back of a tractor, just like that. Little bait pellets made by Bell Labs in the States, and I think Craig from Bell Labs may also have tuned in. The thing about getting rid of rodents on South Georgia is you have to get every last one. You can't afford to leave any, and many of them were living in the most crazy places, like on the side of steep cliffs. And so the bait had to be spread there, and the pilots were remarkably skilled in being able to fly along just the right distance away in the most incredible windy conditions and spread bait. It was hair-raising stuff just to watch. I can't imagine what it was like to fly the things in these conditions. So here are 3 aircraft, all veteran helicopters from Britain. These are Bolcos and made by Messerschmitt, remarkably robust. They were the mainstay of the emergency services in the UK for a long time. The nearest one here is Alpha Sierra. You'll hear me talk about that. The one behind, Tango Charlie, is red, and then the one at the back, Alpha Mike, is the yellow one. So we did the work over 3 seasons. The first one in 2011 was a test, and yet it was still as large as the largest previous eradication of rodents that had been carried out. This was in the area around Grytviken, and some of you may be familiar with that. And we just wanted to see if we could get rid of all of the bad guys and not kill too many of the good guys, the birds that we were trying to protect. Phase 2 in 2013 was at the west end of the island. It's a huge area which almost killed us, not literally, but metaphorically. And I'll talk about this. We just about got finished in the nick of time. The colored areas, incidentally, are separated from each other by glacial barriers, which prevent rats and mice from crossing from one zone to another, and that was important. And then in phase 3, 2015, we went down to the southeast and finished the job, and that was a breeze in comparison with the middle season. So the logistics of all this, as you can imagine, were pretty amazing. Many tons of bait and equipment had to be loaded onto ships. For the second and third season, we were using the Ernest Shackleton British Antarctic Survey ship, which served us very well. Helicopters had to be craned aboard and then squeezed down in the hold, almost touching each other. That was a remarkable operation, just craning them down, knowing full well that if accidentally one were to hit the other, that could be curtains for the entire project. And bait, this is the Bell Labs bait, ready to go down to South Georgia. We had some, I can't remember the numbers now, 300 and something tons, and each box here was one load for one of the Bolko helicopters. That's as much as they could carry. Here's the shack when we arrived at South Georgia, offloading all the bait and helicopters and everything. Then all of the gear, all the equipment, all the supplies had to be put ashore. We did that directly from the shack in the big seasons. This is a load of bait going ashore. The fuel, we used 1 drum of fuel per hour per helicopter, quite a lot of fuel. And every evening and often every morning, we would have a briefing wherever we were. This is in the rather relaxed phase 1 team, relatively few people. We usually got together for a drink in the evening. And the purpose of this was to share views, find out if anyone had any problems, any concerns about risks, for example, health and safety stuff. And my job was then to brief everyone on what the plans were for the next day or that day. We put all of the gear ashore. This is at Husvik in the old whaling station manager's villa. You may recognize some of the people here, John Hall and Sally Ponce. There's Roland in the middle from the documentary team, Pete Garden and George LeMan on the right. I think they're putting beer inside, really important stuff. Then the baiting, hell for leather whenever the weather allowed. And as I'll be talking about, that was a big problem. Always the weather on South Georgia. Well, the bait was put in by hand. And then the pilots had to fly straight lines up and down, controlled by GPS, to make sure as best as possible that there was no gaps. There were no gaps left, because if you were going to fail, chances are that would be a major possible cause of failure. So we had to take great care to make sure there were no gaps. And this is the team checking that the GPS tracks from the helicopter were as expected. And then we would try and identify if there were any gaps and get the pilot to go back and fill them. Here's one of the field campsites. I think this is Peggotty Bluff on the south side, where Shackleton came ashore. What he would have done with one of our helicopters, eh? Taking lunch wherever we could. Looks like a bit boggy there. The helicopters seem to be sinking in a bit. And what an amazing place South Georgia is. Sometimes flying along the spine of the island in magnificent weather, and there were a few days of that. I had to pinch myself to realize what we were doing. It was just an extraordinary time. And we used every opportunity to raise money. Here's one of the chefs who was making cookies. These are rat cookies to sell to tourists. We stopped at no opportunity to get more money, because we were always short of money. And then when the fieldwork was over, we'd go around and look to see what the impact was. In the second, third season, we're able to look at the first season and the second season, and to see how it went. And I have to say it went very well. And the ending was a great one. The South Georgia pipit today is nesting all over the place in numbers not seen in living memory. And the South Georgia pinto, the endemic duck, is also doing very well. So that's the broad outline of the project. And what I've decided to do here to try to help people understand what was going on is just in a few places, I'm taking an extract from my diary to highlight some of the things that really stick out in the memory for me, and which in general didn't make it into my newsletter. So here we are. This is the first season, 11th of February 2011, at sea on the Marina Svetiva. This was a tour ship, and we were kindly given the chance to get the helicopters down to South Georgia on this one. This is from One Ocean. Due to arrive Grytviken on the 13th, Sally's been biosecuring the aircraft and all seems ready. Important that we didn't take nasty things into the island, of course, on the skids of the helicopter. After a manic year of preparation, 13-hour days and many "this is impossible" moments, suddenly the waiting is over, and I'm remarkably confident that we have the right plan, the right resources, and the right people to guide this important and barking mad project to success. And I do, at that time, I mean, we all thought this is crazy. As I gaze out over the Southern Ocean from the helideck, more relaxed than I've been in months, I'm very aware that we on the ship are the lucky ones. We are few in number, but hold in our hands the hopes and expectation of hundreds who have contributed to getting us this far. We cannot, must not let them down. No pressure then. So from the very early days, I was well aware of the fact that we were just representatives of a very big team of people. I was the folk back home like Alison, who were looking after things from there, because all kinds of things we needed and they were as essential as we. The fundraisers, the trustees, everyone involved was just as important as us. And I'd like to pay special tribute here to Sally Ponce, who did some rash eradication on South Georgia before I ever got involved. A lovely lady, an inspiration to so many. She knows the island better than anyone, I suspect, living or dead. And the trustees, this is a photograph taken in 2009 when we were down on the island with Princess Anne. And the trustees are the people that made this barking mad and extraordinary decision. And there wasn't a day that went by without me thinking what an amazing decision that was. None of these people had experience of doing anything like this. The government of South Georgia said, either we can't do it or we won't do it, or both. And so these trustees of a small Scottish charity decided to carry out the world's largest rodent eradication project. How mad is that? And how brilliant that they succeeded. On the right here is Frederick Poulsen. He was and is one of the trustees, and he kindly put in a lot of the money in the early days. And when I was invited to direct this project, Frederick asked me to go for an interview in his boardroom in Switzerland. So I flew out there with the chair of the trust and Mike Richardson, who was the chair of the steering group. And I had 15 minutes to present to Frederick exactly what my vision was for this project. And I was told by his secretary it had to be in 15, not 14 or 16 minutes. So I finished. And he was at the other end of this polished table. And he sat there scratching his chin. And I thought, well, what next? What's going to go on now? And he said to me, "How much do you want?" What do you mean, Freddie? How much do I want? And so I had to come up with a number. I said, Frederick, I want £1 million to buy a helicopter, because at that time I thought they were £1 million each. And then he scratched his chin a bit more and he said, I'll give you £1 million and I'll put in another $500,000 for salaries and other expenses. And that's really the single main kickstart of the project, as far as I was concerned, at least. I know other money had gone in before I was brought into the project, but that I thought in hindsight was probably the most money I've ever made for a 15-minute presentation before, well, certainly before and since. And Frederick became a good friend and remains so today. Michael Moore, another trustee whose family foundation put in a very significant amount of money, again, absolutely essential. And Sam, his son, came along in phase 2 of the operation, and I very much hope they feel that the large investment they put into South Georgia to the habitat restoration project was worthwhile. Mike Richardson, the chair of the steering group, remarkable man, enormous understanding of so many things, and without Mike and his very clear and strong leadership of the steering group, one of the responsibilities of which was to keep me under check. Without him, this would not have been achieved. A fantastic man, and I think I know he's still a trustee of the trust. John Croxall, friend and for many years my immediate boss at British Antarctic Survey. He's got an analytical mind that I've never seen in anyone else. Remarkable man, a great expertise with South Georgia and its birds especially. Important steering group member. Howard Pierce, chair of the board when I came on board to the board, and again, a very can-do and determined character who drove this thing through and had a lot to do with the fundraising. Elaine Shemilt, the deputy chair of the board, and she was a prof at the university and was very instrumental in my getting on the staff at the university. She became an enormous friend, great supportive friend throughout the whole project. And of course, Alison. I think this is the cutest photograph I have of Alison. This was taken on our trip in 2009. Alison, she led on all of the finance, all of the administration, equally important to everything I ever did. And between us, we had a remarkable relationship, both friendly and professional. Very important. Nikki, my PA, who had the chance to come down and I think thoroughly enjoyed the trip, looks like it. And I mentioned the donors. Here's Nick Prentice on the right, who went on to become the chairman of the Board of Trustees. This is before, this photograph was taken before he came onto the board, and he was down there as a donor to the project. And here's our team in the 3rd year of work, including some of the staff from the ship, as well as Team Rat and Team Albatross is in there as well, the supporters. So now on to a bit more of the project, and this is a day I shall never forget. This is day 10 of the 2013, 5th of February. Alpha Mike, one of the aircraft, went up with pilots to collect Alpha Sierra and Tango Charlie. Then I got a radio call from Peter that caused my heart to stop. Both aircraft were badly damaged. Extreme winds had spun Alpha Sierra 90 degrees and dug her in at the heels. And Tango Charlie had a snapped main blade, something which no one had ever seen before. Other damage too. Amazing to see what the storm had wrought. These were unimaginable winds. But astonishingly, we ended the day with all 3 aircraft aboard the ship by digging out Alpha Sierra and swapping blade sets around by tying them to the undercarriage of Alpha Mike. This team has a wonderful can-do attitude and has been tireless and determined. What started as a catastrophe was turned into a triumph. We finished after dark and I collapsed into a heap, rescued by a stiff House of Lords gin and tonic, served by the noble Baroness. This is Barbara, who is the president of the trust. Never has a gin and tonic been so appreciated. And boy, did I appreciate that. So this was that day, 5th of February. We hadn't even started baiting. And you can see what confronted us when we landed. I mean, just I thought I was going to burst into tears. But as I said, things were resurrected because we had such an amazing team of people. These are the engineers checking the damage to see how bad it was. And here's Jamie, who I think might be listening to this, with some of the blades attached to Alpha Mike, and he's got the nose plate of Tango Charlie, which got blown off in the wind. Does it bring back memories? And this sort of can-do attitude and everyone mucking in, exemplified here with all of the supplies for the middle season down in the hold of the ship, being put into plastic barrels so that they could be taken ashore. Here's Rob Webster, my wonderful deputy, being thrown a load of food by Jamie and expertly catching it. And here's another example of the remarkable innovation that the team had. We had a problem with the bucket. This is probably when something got stuck in the spinner. And so I think this is probably our dock upended trying to get it out. You see, he split his trousers with the effort of getting in there. Day 46, this is 2015, camp damaged by wind, too windy to fly. Cape Charlotte lost a sleeping tent and the toilet tent, which was wrecked. And then this is what they did. So having lost the toilet tent, they then took two of the bait boxes, which made a cardboard, and then put them together and chained them down. And this became the Thunderbox for the Cape Charlotte camp. And I just thought that wonderfully exemplified the spirit of the team and how you fix anything. Because of course, when you're on South Georgia, you can't just go to the nearest shop and get another toilet tent. You have to make do with what you got. And this was Cape Charlotte, lovely camp in less windy conditions. Day 29, we're now in the middle season again. This was great. In hindsight, a drop bucket, Jamie to the rescue, all going extremely well. Then Peter reported that his baiting bucket had dropped off. Oh, damn, I said, or worse to that effect. The bucket landed in a bog and was retrieved by a naked Jamie to the amusement of a warmly clothed Dickie Hall. Every field expedition needs a Jamie. What an incredible, resourceful bunch of people we have in Team Rat. But we're now down to just three buckets. We can't afford another loss. I mean, we didn't know at that time what the problem was, and we could have lost the rest of the buckets that day. So it just added to the anxiety. And here's our wonderful emergency medical doctor, Jamie Dobe, who's in there. He can bring anything back to life, Jamie, including an inanimate bait bucket. And there's Dickie still togged up, chuckling away. Oh God, what a day. Yeah, it got a bit bent, but we managed. I mean, that's a remarkable thing. This wasn't the only one we dropped, but luckily we never dropped too many. We just about got away with it. And another sign of the resilience of the team was when we had the three aircrafts stuck behind some really bad weather on another part of the island. They couldn't join us. We had to get the fuel and the bait ashore without the aircraft. And so we came up with this system of putting all of the fuel and the bait into one of the tenders of the ship. You can see that behind. And then manhandling it up onto the shore. And this just took forever. And the effort was exhausting. But again, it just exemplified the attitude of the team. You're not going to stop at anything. You just have to make it work one way or the other. And then the water. Some of the camps weren't close to a water supply. I think this is Husvik. And so the guys would go up with one of these big 1-ton containers, fill it up, and then come down. And then we put it into the tank in the manager's villa, just so that we had running water. Just perfect. And here's our engineer, Paul Wilkinson, Wilco, just resting, taking every opportunity he could to have a rest, probably to get out of the wind. We make do. And here's the doctor, preparing a meal for me, as I discovered. So I was presented with ratatouille, and it was prepared by the chefs. Quite literally, they prepared the rats for me. And now I have to say, in case you're worried, these were not rats that had died by ingesting the toxin. Otherwise, I might not be here today. But these were trapped and then expertly butchered by a doctor. And yeah, and very good they were too. They're not very big. Innovation. You know, there's no TV to watch, or only what you've got on your laptop. So we're coming up with these various games. I think this is an Antipodean game. We've got to get some bags down through the hole there. And we never lost our sense of humor. This was Dickie Hall. Just had a shower, and yes, say no more. This was a good day, a rare day of good weather. And even Germans, we discovered, have a sense of humor. So this is Roland from our documentary team, and he's dressed up his microphone as a rat. They were such good company. Ines, the director of the documentary, and Roland, and they just became completely embedded with us. They were wonderful people, fully part of the team. So another problem. Day 61, this is the middle season, 18th of March, held a meeting with the pilots, Nick, Keith, and Dave, to discuss a problem with the length of the bait pellets that could threaten the project's success. Many are simply too long, causing bridging to in the discs. Blockages don't last long, but one bucket load can sow an area 30% different from the previous load. The ground crews are constantly chasing the right disc size to achieve the correct sowing density. The problem here mostly was we were trying to sow very low densities of bait over much of the island. You don't want to put more bait down than you need. And as a result, the holes in the discs, there's a disc, were small. And we had some pellets, as you can see here, which were just blocking it. And that would just happen time and time again. The problem was resolved for the next season. Bell made sure that the bait was short and everything was fine. And in the end, it all worked. But it was one of the many things that happened in the field. And you think at the time, is this going to cause us to fail? And we just didn't know. Sometimes we had to re-sow bits, but you didn't know when the bucket stopped distributing bait. There was a lot of guesswork involved. And I remember someone saying to me, it's not the known unknowns that will make the project fail if it fails. It's the unknown unknowns. And this was certainly one of the unknown unknowns. We had no idea anything like this could ever happen. And here's a brand new motor for one of the spinners and the buckets. We thought we could replace it, and then it came out of the box smashed to pieces, and completely non-repairable. And this was just the sort of day-to-day problems that we had to deal with. No doubt Jamie did something with this, I don't know, and somehow got it going again. But you know, this kind of technical problem happened all the time. Bad weather. I mentioned earlier on the weather was a real factor. Here we are, 6th of April, 2013. Wind light as forecast, which is great, except it was pissing with rain all morning, and both other camps reported the same. We just can't seem to get low winds and adequate visibility. So unbelievably frustrating. Same all afternoon, day after day after day. And by this time, I was now resigned to the fact that we were unlikely to finish. And I was thinking what a cruel blow that would be to everyone involved, not just us in the field, but all of those who had contributed in some way to getting us there. And I realized it would take a dramatic change in the weather soon, because winter was almost upon us. And the 6th of April, this is getting very late in the season. And I just hope that everyone would understand that we were doing our very, very best, but just beaten by the weather. And I said, I'm struggling to keep smiling and exude confidence. As the director of the project, I couldn't allow the team to become depressed because I realized things were not going very well. I had to put on a brave face, but I found it increasingly difficult. And actually, Sarah, who is one of the team listening in here, she was one of the people that kept me sane during this period. I would sometimes go in for a cup of tea at Grytviken, and she would come and put her arm around me and say, "It'll be all right." And it was in the end, but I really valued that support. And this is the kind of thing we're up against. This is a grid file. The red icons here just mean it's very windy, and South Georgia is in the path of constant winds. We had different ways of dealing with these stresses. Here's Rob, who's a wonderful string player. He makes his own violins, can you believe? And here he is in the church just playing by himself. Well, just with someone photographing him. But we had to get away and just try to console ourselves and then come back smiling. More frustration, day 81. Low pressure, very light winds and some clag at dawn. All 3 helos set off for Brighton Beach, got as far as Brown Point and there to shut down. Then they started baiting. You get the sense that things were just day after day after day going badly. And I ended by saying, this island is just impossible. Day 81, for heaven's sake, and we were still up against it. And this is the kind of thing that we were putting up with. That was Wiz, by the way, Wiz Pasteur, looking at, and I think she might be listening in as well. And you fill the time as best you could. There were some videos on laptops, and we would sit around, for hour after hour after hour, just trying to keep busy, because otherwise it becomes soul destroying. It became really very, very difficult. Here are the pilots stuck out somewhere in bad weather and doing their best sleeping. Take out one of the seats and just put out the sleeping bag. That's George. And the engineers maintaining the aircraft in the most fearful conditions. Extraordinary. Then a few days later, day 83, perfect weather. Baiting all day until 7 o'clock. Kong Haakon and Cheapman zones completed. All being well, all 3 aircraft will be flying mouse pellets tomorrow, which has a good forecast. Seems we're in a stable period of weather for the first time. And it just shows how quickly things could change. And once we did get good weather, we could really move. You might see the photograph on the wall behind me. It's this one here. This was one of those dingle days when we could really make progress. 3 aircraft, all working hard, pilots with unimaginable energy, as for the guys on the ground, loading and loading and loading. We could really get going once the weather allowed. And here's Peter, like a kestrel, hovering in the wind, watching his bait bucket being filled before going off again. How many times he did this, I guess we've probably got a note somewhere, but hundreds. And look at this, turning sharply at the end of one line to go back on a reciprocal course. Peter didn't waste a second. And then a few days later, low morale. Mark, one of the engineers, spoke to me about some people wanting to get home. I also spoke at length to Peter about what's causing the malaise that's evident. And it was really worrying me. It was clear that some people were really struggling. And Pete said that it's the uncertainty about when people are leaving that's causing the problem. So I called Alison to get the latest estimate of dates for 2 of the boats that we thought might be able to get us off the island, at least some of the people, and gave the update in the evening meeting. And I was reflecting that I wish I'd understood earlier what the problem was. It's a fast-moving situation. I'd spoken about exactly this just a week earlier, and nothing had changed. So I hadn't realized I needed to keep people up to date, even if it's just to say nothing's changed. And I reflected that the stress of working in these conditions under this pressure, without a day off, month after month, is really getting to us, and some more than most. Even though we all knew it would be like this from the outset, we knew that there would not be a finished date, but it was still unsettling. And I asked Rob, my deputy, to keep his ear to the ground so that we could anticipate this problem before it got this bad and try and resolve it. So I could be more sensitive than I obviously was being. These were tough times. And now we skip on a month, day 113, 18th of May, 2013. I remember this day for the rest of my days. Now or never. Intensely cold night, and boy, it was cold. Briefing by Peter before we set off, before sunrise. We had such short days. We had to take advantage of every moment of light. He said the powdery snow presents real danger, and we may have to abandon everything if the Hope Valley site, our last loading site, has any depth of it. We flew off in convoy, all 3 aircraft. We were down by this time to a team of 13. And miraculously, we found the load site was clear. It had blown so hard, all the snow had gone. So I went round to the pilots individually and the engineers, and I said, "Are you okay? Are you happy that this is safe enough?" And they all nodded and said, "Yeah." So off we went. And we knew this was our last chance. I mean, you know, it's near midwinter, for heaven's sake. And this was it. So it was -4 on the ground, -8 where the pilots were flying at 2,000 feet with the door, had to have the door off so they could look underneath the aircraft to see what was happening with the bait. I mean, unimaginable discomfort up there. Keith taped, this is Keith Springer, taped chemical hand warmers to the solenoids in the bucket control boxes, but even then they sometimes froze. They were in the back of the helicopter. We just kept going and fixed the problems as they arose. And then suddenly there were no loads left. I remember the moment. I thought, what can it really be? Have we really done the impossible? And my overwhelming sense was not joy. It was just relief. Thank goodness for that. Now what? Here was our last camp, Rosita. Very, very cold. I'd forgotten my sleeping bag. I'd never had such a cold night in my entire life. Here's the powdery snow at the camp that so worried the pilots, and you can see why. Rob breaking the ice off the bait boxes so that we could get inside. The bait was perfectly protected, but we had to get to it. And then clearing the camp, we immediately, next morning, I started clearing the camp. We had to get out of there so late in the season. And then packing up the aircraft for their long journey home. They had to be dismantled to go in the crates. So that's it, folks. I hope it's given you an idea of this story, not just the lovely stuff that went into the newsletters and which you've seen on the website saying, you know, how wonderful it was. And indeed, it was wonderful. But obviously, there were a few things that didn't go quite as smoothly as they might have done along the way. Myself and Team Rat put together this book after the last baiting phase. It's still available from all good booksellers and the South Georgia Heritage Trust. Full of lovely photographs. Many of them I've shown you, and yeah, buy it if you haven't. All the funds goes to supporting the project, and well, South Georgia Heritage Trust. And let me stop this. With what we're going to do, yeah. What we're going to do now is to see a short video that Mari's going to put on for you, because we had a problem with me showing it a little earlier. And this was put together by the documentary team, Roland and Ines, and it kind of summarized what we were doing there. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy this short video.
This is good.
Evening, everybody, and thanks very much, Tony, for that. That's really interesting. So I'm Alistair Wilson. I was a scientist at King Edward Point for 2.5 years, during the time of which Tony and Team Rat carried out phase 1 of the eradication project. I've also worked on other UK islands, including the Scilly rat eradication, and Bird Island, where I was the penguin and petrel zoologist for 1.5 years. So what work is happening now to keep South Georgia safe from a ratty invasion? Biosecurity is the key. The South Atlantic Biosecurity Detector Dogs team of Naomi and Sammy have been working in the Falkland Islands and South Georgia to protect the islands from rodents. That's a joint biosecurity effort with Working Dogs for Conservation, Government of South Georgia and South Sandwich Islands, and the Falkland Islands government. This vital work is paying dividends already. 2 fishing vessels have already been found with rat signs on board, and because of that, the South Georgia government refused them entry into the South Georgia Maritime Zone in order to protect the islands, because that's the best way to stop any problems, is stop the rats getting to the island, and then this project can carry on in how successful it's been. Sammy and Naomi have been spending time at King Edward Point, and they've been going out to many of the landing spots around the island to check for rodents. And the best news of all is that they haven't found any. So that's how we want it to continue. Biosecurity is obviously really important, and bait boxes are just one tool used to monitor for rodent signs. Some of the times the wildlife has other ideas about what the bait boxes are for, though. Across South Georgia, some species are showing incredible signs of recovery already. As Tony mentioned, the South Georgia pipit in particular, before the eradication, at places like King Edward Point, you'd get juveniles coming through the station, dispersing from rat-free islands, but they never survived, never bred successfully. But that's all changed now, and there's masses of pipits breeding in many locations across the island, all the way up to the Scree line. So for anyone lucky enough to be heading south, keep your eyes peeled for them, and ears as well, so that you can hear their beautiful song. Pintail, they're also far more numerous on the island now. Regular sightings of fluffy ducklings scampering through the tussock. Apparently, for those people that are on South Georgia now, they're getting some frights going through the tussock, expecting to come across a fur seal, but then having ducks popping out in front of them. But as many people might know, pintail have been found to be carnivorous, so maybe they need to start watching out for pintail rather than fur seal. Seabirds, on the other hand, have a much slower life history. They usually only have one chick per year, so they take much longer to respond to changes. This is a white-chinned petrel, and they nest in burrows in amongst the tussock. And recent surveys by South Georgia government have found that there are now higher occupancies of white-chinned petrel burrows by the birds, so that's a really positive sign. It takes quite a long time to see any of the changes in the seabird populations, but fingers crossed it's going to carry on in this positive way. On Bird Island, there have never actually been rats before, and so these are the sorts of views that you get from the island during the summer. Clouds of seabirds above the water, feeding on invertebrates that are in the water, waiting to come ashore at night when the island is safe from bigger predatory birds like skuas. And it's not just important to the smaller seabirds. Tony did point out that many of the larger birds are actually safe from the effects of the rats. But if any of you have seen the terrible photographs that come out of Gough Island, rodents can take to predating larger bird chicks. It never happened on South Georgia that we know of, but it only really takes time. And so by getting rid of the rats, you remove that possibility from ever happening. On the smaller end of the scale, the Wilson's storm petrel, for example, nests in crevices and gaps in rocks, and they have a really strange little rasping call that in the evening and at night you can hear emanating from rocky boulder fields and caves and crags, something that you wouldn't usually hear on the rest of South Georgia, but it was a regular sound on Bird Island where there were no rats. Lower down on the island slopes of Bird Island, you've got masses and masses of tussock. And this is mostly where the other seabird species nest hidden away in their burrows. The massive number of burrows in the tussock on Bird Island means it's quite tricky to get around. So you have to keep to paths and avoid heavily burrowed areas. Prions and petrels, diving petrels, etc., they all dig into the soft tussock peat, where there'd be easy prey for rats. The chicks and eggs, when the adults go to sea to forage, be left. The chicks would be left unattended, and so an easy snack for a rat. That on Bird Island, they also nest underneath research hides, which made taking this photograph a lot easier, because obviously you can't dig down into the burrows. But they call at night to their partners as well. So those birds that we saw flying above the water, they'll come in at night, and because it's dark, they listen for their partner calling from the burrow to find out where they're going to land and go into which burrow. So the soundscape on Bird Island at night is incredible. It's really quite haunting and beautiful at the same time, and you kind of wonder what these odd noises are until you find out which species of birds they are making these different noises. And hopefully that is now something that will gradually spread across South Georgia as these seabird populations start recovering. Tussock isn't just important as a nesting habitat, it's also full of bird food. So this is a tussock beetle, and while the seabirds head back out to sea during winter, pipits don't have that option. So a good supply of insects in the tussock and insects all along the seashore that they can feed on in the winter is really important, and not competing with rats is obviously a bonus in a hard winter. So just ahead of the rat eradication, South Georgia government carried out a successful reindeer removal project that I was part of, and the main thing that has helped with has been partly it made the rat eradication possible, but it also has meant that there's no grazing pressure on the island anymore. So the reindeer would graze the tussock completely down. And in these comparison photographs, you can see the top one when reindeer were present, and then the bottom, you can see all the tussock starting to regrow. And obviously, if you're a nesting seabird and there is no tussock, you're going to struggle. So that amount of tussock that's now regrowing provides many more nesting opportunities for these birds around the island. South Georgia government has been monitoring this change, and on the Bath Peninsula, 50% of the quadrats that they surveyed had increasing tussock cover, while only 7% had reduced cover. So it's obviously having a big impact. And this is a mossy bank on one part of the island, which was completely grazed off and badly eroded by the reindeer. But that's now growing back as well. And so that's obviously great news for the wildlife that relies on the tussock for nesting opportunities and for the food that it can hold. Thankfully, the incredible work that has happened and continues to happen to protect the island has given South Georgia and its incredible wildlife and habitats a really bright future. So hopefully the rest of South Georgia will gradually kind of turn into this kind of oasis that Bird Island is. So I thought, now that I've spoken to you a little bit about it, you might like to hear those sounds from the island. So hopefully I'll be able to share a short video with you.
Well, that was absolutely fantastic, Alistair. And having lived on the island of South Georgia for many, many years, but on the main island where a lot of these birds have not yet returned, for me, listening to those last sounds is just extraordinary. I would love to ask you, Alistair, we'll start the questions. Do you know what species it is that's making that sound almost like a howler monkey? You're muted, by the way, Alistair, so you might.
Yeah, I was thinking. So the final clip in the starlight, there was a cackling noise of giant petrel in the middle of it, but then most of the other noises were diving petrels.
Wow,
which
such a
nest
tiny...
literally in the tussock just behind the station, and makes you slightly nervous when you go out and start hearing all these noises coming from the ground.
I would dearly love to hear it one day. That's absolutely wonderful to hear. We have had lots and lots of questions come in, so I'm going to amalgamate some of those because quite a lot of them are on similar themes. So we're going to start off with one question that came in from Amy Campbell, who, I think this is for you, Tony. You're just muted if you'd like to come off mute there. One of the parts of her question was, were any of the pilots that were involved in the baiting work involved in any other island de-ratting projects?
The answer to that is absolutely yes. We had the privilege of being able to pick some of the best of this relatively small pool of really experienced people. So Peter Garden, the chief pilot, he's recently published a book about his life in this field, and he's been absolutely everywhere. I recommend it to people to read. But all of our baiting pilots were very experienced, and it's the sort of thing that takes years and years and years to learn, and they did it brilliantly. And what impressed me, the best way I could characterize it, is when Peter and the others get in a helicopter, it's like they strap it to themselves, and it becomes part of them, and they fly it in such a fluid way. It's a joy to watch.
And someone else also asked, were the same staff returning for each of the phases of this project?
Some did, some didn't. I'm looking here at one of the rear pages of the book, and it shows who was in which phases. And there were not many of us, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 who did all 3 seasons. Many did 2, and a bunch did 1. The thing is that in the first year, we didn't need such a big team. And in the third year, we didn't need such a big team because the area was smaller. But in the middle season, I think at the peak, we had 26 staff.
Wow. One here for you, Alistair. We've had a few questions from people who maybe saw reindeer on the island if they visited in earlier years, or knew that there were reindeer on the island, asking what happened to them. Can you tell us that part of the story?
Yeah, so before the rat project could happen, obviously reindeer being on the island, there was a risk that they would eat the bait, and so that would stop rats eating the bait, and also it would kill the reindeer as well, obviously. So South Georgia government ran a reindeer removal project that took place over a couple of seasons. A large number of them were rounded up by Sami reindeer herders, and they were humanely slaughtered, and the meat was actually processed and then taken off to the Falkland Islands. So many of the cruise ships and things that were around South Georgia at that time were serving South Georgia reindeer meat. Yeah, so that's what happened to the reindeer. There's no reindeer left on South Georgia anymore, which is incredible for the habitats that are there. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alistair. Ross James, Tony, has asked whether you would say something about the non-target mortality. What sort of species were most affected, and what was done to try to reduce the non-target mortality?
Yeah, a really important question. And one of the luxuries we had on South Georgia, unlike any other eradication that's been done, is that we could separate the island by virtue of the glaciers. So as I showed in some slides there, we were able to do a test area in the first year, knowing that if it went catastrophically wrong and we were killing all the birds as well as all the rats, or maybe all the birds and not the rats, then we could stop and it wouldn't be a catastrophic impact on the island. We were most concerned about the pipits and the pintails because they're endemic to South Georgia, but we were interested, of course, on any impact on any species. So we monitored that after the first year. An independent panel of experts was convened to look at the evidence, and it was they who said to the South Georgia Heritage Trust, we're confident that the damage will be quickly reversed, and therefore you can go ahead with the phase 2 and subsequently phase 3, knowing that the damage is not irrevocable. And in fact, the evidence of that was already apparent when we went back 2 years later after the first field season. The pipits and the ducks, which we had been most worried about, were already responding very positively to the absence of rats. So yeah, I mean, many species were a concern, but in the end, few took the bait, and none took it in an unsustainable way.
Okay, we're going to do 2 more questions. One again is an amalgamation of several questions that have come in. are people wondering whether there are concerns about rats coming back to the island, for instance, on cruise ships? What sort of measures might have been put in place to prevent that? I don't know whether, Tony, you would feel confident in taking that, or we might even ask Alison if she would like to come in if you're not. Are you happy to take it, Tony?
Well, let Alison do it. She's more up to date than I am, so I think Alison would be more appropriate.
So, I mean, ever since the baiting ended and we jointly declared success with the government of South Georgia, the South Georgia Heritage Trust supporters and the Friends of South Georgia Island supporters have been contributing some funding to the governments by a security programme. And, you know, that's just an incredible programme where they started off with some dogs from Working Dogs for Conservation in the USA, which was an incredible organisation that retrained strays, as I understand it. And they had 2 dogs initially over from them. Sammy was one, and Sammy is still one of the biosecurity dogs that's working to keep South Georgia safe. So the government's put together this incredible programme. It started as a trial, and it was based in the Falkland Islands, and that had 2 handlers and 2 dogs going on to some of the ships to check for rats and mice. And I'm delighted to say that the government has now made that programme permanent, and Naomi, who is one of the handlers, I believe is going to be joined by some other ones, but Naomi is the handler that's looking after Sammy as part of that permanent programme, with the ambition of basically checking every ship that heads to South Georgia to make sure there are no rats and mice on board ultimately. So by trying to deal with the problem upstream before it gets to the island, as Alistair said, that's absolutely the most effective way to keep the island safe. And I'd just like to thank all of the South Georgia Heritage Trust and Friends of South Georgia Island supporters for supporting that government programme and, you know, making sure that our work didn't get undone by looking after those dogs. So thanks for that, Sarah.
Thank you. And so, Tony, I'm going to end with a question that I think is lovely because it looks forward. And the question was, if others are stepping into a role of leading or directing an eradication, what can prepare them for such a role? And what skills or prior knowledge did you have before you took on this work?
Wow. Yeah. Good question. I'll try and keep the answer as short as possible. In terms of qualities, I think, I mean, looking around at the people who've done this successfully around the world, and Keith Springer, who's listening in, I know, is one of the best exemplars of this. You need dedication and a real can-do attitude, and don't let anything grind you down. I would say those are the most important characteristics. So what was the second part of the question? Just remind me.
Yes, what experience did you have to take this on?
Yeah, so I came at this as a cetacean and seabird biologist, but it so happens that I had a pilot's license when I was younger. I like driving big machines, big yellow machines. I like fixing problems. And I knew South Georgia fairly well, and I understood some of the biological realities of what we would have to overcome if we weren't going to kill the birds with the rodents. So I had a mishmash of different experience and expertise, which I hoped I could bring to bear, and most importantly, to select a team that would do the job. Overwhelmingly, that was the important thing, to bring together, because I didn't have, I couldn't fly helicopters like Peter and Dave and the others. And the wonderful thing was the South Georgia Heritage Trust gave me the flexibility. They gave me the latitude to employ the people who I thought would do the job. And that was so very important. I can't exaggerate that, how important it was. So get a great team around you, get a team of resilient, robust, can-do people like Jamie and Keith and all the others that fix the problems, and then just go for it and never stop. I would say that's it, really.
Brilliant. And I just happen to know, Tony, that the immense amount that you learned from doing this over so many years, you're now using still, aren't you, on various committees and so on for other eradications around the world?
Yes, I'm on the technical advisory group for stoat eradication in Orkney, in Britain. I've just been asked to join a panel of people to try to find out what went wrong on Gough Island. Many of you will know that an eradication went on there last year and very sadly failed. And I've been asked to try and look at the evidence to see what went wrong. And incidentally, when Gough Island failed, when it was discovered there was still some mice there, I got a knot in my stomach because I realized how close we were ourselves to failing like that, because no one at the moment knows definitely what went wrong on Gough. And the same thing could have so easily happened on South Georgia. We were so lucky. I mean, it was luck. You know, you can do as much planning as you like, but ultimately there's an element of luck, and we were very lucky. So I'm doing that, and also I'm running a campaign to get rid of American mink in East Anglia, and hopefully that we're going for world dominion first, then the rest of England, Wales, Scotland, then Europe and South America.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, lots of people have also asked whether there will be a recording of this presentation. It will be going up in a few days' time. We have a YouTube channel, SGHT, South Georgia Heritage Trust YouTube channel, and we will put out a link to that on our social media. So folks, look out for that. So we're now handing over to our CEO, Alison Neal, who's going to tell us about some of the current and planned projects of our charities.
Thank you, Sarah. So I just really want to thank, first of all, Tony and Alistair for those amazing talks, which we all really enjoyed, and huge trip down memory lane for everyone that was involved in the project. And, you know, it just shows what an amazing team effort it was. And I really want to mention our friends at Friends of South Georgia Island here as well, because, you know, they contributed so much in terms of the fundraising that, you know, allowed this project to happen. And now we've got a situation where South Georgia has inspired the rest of the world. You know, it is showing that it's possible to actually roll back human damage. It's possible to make a difference. But there's still so many bad news stories out there about the environment. And we really want to inspire, encourage people to believe that they can make a difference, and South Georgia can do that. And there's still more work to be done on South Georgia. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of the upcoming initiatives that we have planned. And they carry on that desire to roll back human damage and change attitudes to nature. So we've commissioned an incredible piece of public art by a sculptor called Michael Visoki. And what he is planning to do is, through his sculpture, which is 7 tables, he's going to put the story of the whale back into the heart of Grytviken whaling station and the South Georgia experience. The sculpture is called Commensalis, and it consists of 7 tables, one of which, the key table, reflects the impact on Southern Ocean whales of the industry that operated at the island, as we spoke about, for over half a century. And as well as introducing rats and mice, of course, there was a direct impact on the whales, some of which were driven to extremely low numbers during that industry. The remaining 6 tables in Michael's sculpture represent the hope and the joy of 6 different species of whales that are returning to the waters of the Southern Ocean. And each of the tables has a pattern of shining rivets, as you can see here, and each pattern reflects something unique about that whale species. For example, there's a humpback whale table, and its rivets represent the bubble net that the humpbacks make when they're circling their prey. We're going to launch a campaign, excuse me, to make this sculpture possible and to put the whale's tail centre stage at South Georgia. By sponsoring a rivet, you can help to influence every visitor to South Georgia to believe that we can bring positive change to nature. Every donation will support the creation of the sculpture and will help to fund research into whale ecology, so that in these times of global change, we can understand how best to protect the future of these amazing creatures. Aren't they wonderful? And, you know, recent visitors to South Georgia will tell you that you're seeing more and more of these whales as you travel down on the cruise ships. And in fact, the humpback whales are now back to pre-hunting levels, which is just incredible news for the environment. But there are so many other pressures on these whales, and we have to try and kind of understand their world to actually make things better for them. So equally inspiring is our next major heritage and environmental initiative, which is beginning this November with a survey of Stromness and Grytviken whaling stations. The goal, with your help and with government approval, will be to reduce the human footprint at South Georgia by removing environmental hazards like asbestos and flying debris, and to help the South Georgia government to remove all of the remaining oil from the whaling stations. By working together, we can not only help protect the environment and South Georgia's wildlife, we hope to make Stromness whaling station safe for visitors to enter and to visit Stromness Manager's Villa, of course, where Shackleton, Worsley and Crean found help with the rescue of the crew of the Endurance. And I think we were all really fascinated by the Endurance 22 expedition, and those guys are very interested in this project. If you like, it's the next chapter in the Shackleton story. So we're really hoping to do some events and get those guys involved. Thanks to the generosity of our donors, we've already raised the funds to make the survey possible in November this year, and that will have a look to see what needs to be done to actually make Stromness whaling station safe and to preserve the manager's villa for posterity and make the station safe for wildlife and people. So I hope that's interesting to all of you. And we hope that you're ready to join us again to help to protect South Georgia. And Sarah is now going to tell you about a fun and rewarding way that you can take part and support our work. So back to Sarah.
Thank you, Alison. So yes, I am delighted to say that starting this evening, we have a really wonderful online auction for you all. Now, I'm going to highlight just a few of the lots, but on this auction, we actually have 31 or more auction lots, and the variety of lots is just huge, from one-off lifetime experiences, antiques, signed books, all sorts of things. So just to highlight a few for you. We have had the most amazing support from our friends at Albatross Expeditions, who have kindly donated most fantastic Antarctic cruise. And it's going down to Antarctica in March this year. March next year, 2023. So at the end of the next southern season, called the Giants of the Southern Ocean Whale Voyage. Now, there is something I would love to do. Now, this really is the most wonderful chance for someone to make this voyage. So it's for 2 people, a 9-day cruise. It'll go to the Antarctic and to the South Shetland Islands, and the accommodation on board their lovely vessel is in a stateroom with a private balcony. So really traveling in style. So fantastic, go down and see the whales, and potentially for someone the bargain of a lifetime. Then you can see here, our second slide in here is this beautiful original oil painting by our friend Beverly Ensley. She entitled this, and I love this, Putting on the Ritz. It's got real swagger and style, just like our penguin here. And this is a penguin actually that they've encountered at Gold Harbor this year when she was traveling down to South Georgia. And she said about this particular penguin, she believes it looks like it owns the place, and I have to agree. So you can bid on that and have that on your wall. Also, trustee of the Friends of South Georgia Island, who are co-hosting the auction with us, one of their trustees, Peter Harrison, has made the most generous gift. Now, this is of his fantastic new guide to all the seabirds of the world. It's called Seabirds, the New Identification Guide. And this is a very, very special copy. It's not only the boxed conservation limited edition copy, there's only 1,000 of those being produced, but to make it extra, extra special, Peter has done one of his beautiful watercolor paintings. It's of a king penguin and it's in the flyleaf. And even to make it even more special than that, Peter will also add a special personalized message for the winning bidder. So that is, for those of you who love your wildlife, your birds, that's an absolute must. And the proceeds from that very special book are going to specifically to support wildlife conservation. Finally, we have this amazing rat pack. You can see a whole variety of things. Now, this does include that book that Tony was talking about, Reclaiming South Georgia, signed copy, of course, and also, and very specially, the very last habitat restoration t-shirt. Now, Tony, if I'm right, I think you might be sporting one of these. Could you just stand up and let us see? Thank you very much. And I think, Alistair, you might have dug one of these out. There we go. Yes, lovely. Now, these were so sought after. They were never, as I think I'm correct in saying, never actually for sale, or they might have been. But anyway, this is literally the very last one. And I can tell you they're worth a fortune, because one day we went out on board a cruise ship and somebody said, I will give you $1,000 for that t-shirt that you're wearing. Well, what's a girl meant to do? So we had $1,000. So in that pack, then lots of lovely goodies, including a first day cover and those rat patches, which everybody also is always seeking after. So I'm delighted to say that that auction has gone live now. So our final slide this evening will show where you can get that. And we will be sending out another e-bulletin to those of you on our mailing list so that you can see where to go for that. There are experiences, there are antiques, there are artworks, and there is just so much more. And it's a great way to be able to support the work of the Friends of South Georgia Island and the South Georgia Heritage Trust. So that is now live. After you have switched off from our presentation tonight, pop over there, grab yourself a bargain. So now, final word goes, of course, to our CEO, Alison Neal.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone. And look out for that special email that Sarah was telling you about. It's got links to the online auction. And if you've enjoyed this evening's talk and you feel like, you know, it's worthwhile to support SGHT and Friends of South Georgia Island, do consider making a donation to help us continue to keep South Georgia protected and a special place as we all know it is. Okay, we'll see you very soon. Thank you. Bye.